I entered into an area where I was not having any background, but slowly we developed and we reached to a stage where we are today. In my talk, it's not anything serious on the subject, but you can see how research problems can be taken up, how we can move towards our fundamental contribution, the research, what should be the aim of research, what should be the usability of the research, and where we should stop. I know most of you are from academics. You have the freedom to do the research for the creation of knowledge. We have some restriction. We have to create new knowledge. But apart from that, we have to see that our knowledge is translated towards the industry. So you can take my entire talk as a case study of a CSIR scientist. So with that, now I will start sharing. I may take few minutes because I'm not very is my slide visible? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
हमारी slide दिखाई पड़ रही है?
Yes, sir, visible.
Okay, thank you. So as you see, the title is Biomaterials, an interesting yet unplanned journey from biomimetics to biodegradable alloys. So first I will talk about our interest. Why did we enter into this field? What is biomimetics? What we have done there and what we are doing now. So I see that in CSIR, our research should always be oriented towards finding the solutions which are worth finding. If you look at from materials perspective, I think you will appreciate the challenges before the society, as we know the grand, we call it grand challenges, are in terms of energy, transportation, housing, depleted material resources and health. And like any other field, materials technology or materials engineering is now also got the responsibility that through its R&D, it should address the important problem in these 5 sectors. So if you look overall, the main challenge in front of the material scientists is to design and synthesize functional material which should be lightweight and carry the high strength. And not only that, they should be sustained, the process and the material should be sustainable, your process should be scalable, and most importantly, there must be a financial component, and that is the affordability. Industry and the society both should be able to afford the technology being developed or the materials being developed. If you look at the growth, because materials are as old as the human civilization, since the development of a human being, materials have always been used by him. But with the time, with the passage of the time and the growth of the knowledge, the materials have moved from the conventional process of heat and beat to like the drawing board of an architect. Now we can design the material. We can design the material as well as the structure through human intervention, from molecular assembly. And you know, now people are working towards a computational or a unified approach where you can design the material from atomic level to the macro level or to the device. So from quantum to continuum, that is the way science is going. And I think in future, it will be possible to design newer and the newer material or the component using those material which we even cannot think today. Now I will come to the nanomaterial. After 1984 or so, the nanomaterial has become a buzzword. Everybody, all the department, be it metallurgy, ceramic, physics, chemistry, mathematics, even not biology, they are working towards nanomaterial for different objective. I will take one particular objective, though I have not started our work with this objective. I will come to that. But presently we are working, or we have worked in the past on nanomaterials for the health sector. So now you know the ceramic, the material, the nanomaterial, they are being used for the reconstruction of the human parts, human organ, for the drug delivery and the diagnosis. But as a physicist, if I say nanomaterial, then it means it carries no meaning to me, because nano is a length scale, 10 to the power minus 9 meter. Then so what? 10 to the power minus 6 is micron. But once we reach this 10 to the power minus 9 length scale, material shows a drastic variation its property most of the time towards good, provided the material that has been developed in nano size have a control interplay among the structure, organization, and the dynamics. Means the nanomaterial that are being synthesized should have uniform size distribution, designed morphology. There should not be any agglomeration. If they are forming a structure, there should be a well-defined organization and the dynamics of that organization into large length scale. Means if you can control nanomaterial microstructurally from microstructure to macrostructure, only then your nanomaterial can deliver you the results that you expect from it. Now coming to the health issue, you know that with our improvement in the lifestyle or awareness, the average age of the human being increases. In terms of India, in 1947, when the average age was 46 years, in the 2015, it has got that around 70 years. And I think if you see the different graphs, the first graph, if you see today, around 2021, we have very large fraction of the population which is 50 plus. Then 60 plus is also increasing and 80 plus is also increasing. Though India has the demographic advantage, but it is true that as the time will pass, we will have more and more older people. And as the age will increase, because of the lifestyle or our food habits or our life habit, our disease burden will increase, and one of them, or the most the thing which affect most is the orthopedic problem with age, where the mobility got restricted. So this is the one area where nanomaterial have shown promise, and we have been working in that area, but we approached there, we reached there accidentally. So before coming here, let me tell you, in 1996, when I joined NML as a scientist, we started working on the production of neodymium iron boron permanent magnetic nanopowder using a chemical aqueous reduction route, because India has a last resource of the rare earth metal. We were successful in that. We got a US patent. But the problem was, when we were producing this nanomaterial of neodymium iron boron on a some large, not a very large scale, say 250 gram per batch via an aqueous reduction process, which was exothermic, we found it is very difficult to control shape, size, morphology of those nanoparticles and keep them away from the agglomerations. Because once they are getting agglomerated, then their property are being lost. So that's the thing that was the start of my career in the field of nanomaterial. Now looking at those Now coming back to the nanomaterial, with the help of the nanomaterial, or say the advancement of the material science in general, we know that the use of in the early times in 1940-30, for any bone fracture, we were using commodity material. There were different ceramics, even the metal rods, they were being used, whose role was to provide only the mechanical support to the defected part of the bone. May I request the audience to please switch off their mic, to please mute it. Somewhere it's creating. So then 1980 onwards, there is a concept of biocompatible material. Basically for bone, it's a calcium.
The account section is not accepting this. We are not giving any payment for LC opening.
Participants, please.
Not possible in government organization. Payment will be made only.
Participants, please mute your mobile or systems.
I will request the audience to please mute themselves.
Please, sir, continue, sir.
Okay. So, as I was telling you, in the orthopedics, 1950 onward, before 1950, we were using commodity material for the bone support during any fracture or any bone wound healing, for any bone wound healing, where the growth was natural, the regeneration was natural, only the material was providing a mechanical support. Then 1980, there was a concept of biocompatible material, like we know calcium phosphate, calcium hydroxyapatite, it's a well-known material, and that was used as bone graft, and it was supporting the bone growth. It was not initiating the bone growth. The bone was again healing naturally, and this biocompatible material, they were supporting that healing. They were helping cells to get adhere to the surface, then proliferate, then the filling of the gap. But in the 2000 onwards, with the development of nanomaterials and nanobioceramic in particular, we could develop the material. Once you put that at the bone defect, it can instruct the body to start healing. So it has reduced the healing time to a great extent. So this is one of the benefit towards this orthopedic treatment of nanomaterial. But as I told you that I have not started my career in the biomaterial. I started my career in the nanomagnetic material. And the problem we faced there, that how to synthesize nanomaterial on the large scale, having the microstructure control. And when I say large scale, that is the industrial scale. And when I say macrostructure control, it means uniformity in the shape, size, and keeping them away from the agglomeration. And how can we go on the industrial scale? And then you have to make a product of the material or of the powder. So how we can assemble them into 3 dimensions? That is the first question. I will not come to the second question right now, but that was the first question. How to synthesize nanomaterial with controlled morphological feature in an economical way, and that too on the industrial scale. And you know, there are the various ways to produce the nanomaterial, you know, ball milling, this and that. There are so many now advanced techniques, but they are all energy extensive. They consume a lot of energy. They are costly. There are a lot of problems with them. But whereas chemical process, if can be designed suitably and can be controlled, it is one of the most economical and the green process. So that was our first question. And And this is something about 1998 or the 1999, and there was no direct help in the literature. So there is a quote by Einstein: if you have any problem, then look deep into the nature, and then you will understand everything better. Not only we, this is the area, not only our group. That was the time that various group, by chance, I do not know how there was a greater design. They were all looking towards this code and looking towards the same thing where we started looking. So we started looking at the nature. And looking towards the nature is not a new thing for the innovators. You know, this Leonardo da Vinci, who has thought of designing an aeroplane by seeing a flying bird, which ultimately became a reality, not by him, but by the Wright brothers, but the concept came to him. So nature had been an inspiration for innovators, scientists, and the artists since the beginning. So now coming to nature from materials point of view. If you look at, even if you look at your body, or you look at this materials kingdom present in the nature, you go to any seashore and see, you will find that most of the inorganic nanomaterial produced by nature, they are nanocomposites. All those materials are synthesized under ambient conditions. If you take any natural biologically produced inorganic material or the composite and looked it under microscope, you will find that there is a great uniformity in microstructure and size distribution. You will find that they are not welded, they are not joined, but they are self-assembled. Your entire body, our entire body is self-assembled. Over each bone, which has got the toughness of the order of aluminum alloy, is synthesized in the mother's womb under ambient conditions, right? And there is no sintering. And if you look at its bond chemistry, it's all a game of the ionic and the secondary bond. So from where such an strength is coming? The answer is the next point. Naturally produced materials have got a hierarchical microstructure. Naturally produced inorganic materials are known for multifunctionality. The calcium carbonate, you see even in the bird's nail, you find the calcium carbonate, and even the eye lens of many of the birds is made up of the calcium carbonate. So same calcium carbonate, same calcite phase have got the multifunctionality. You cut your skin, it will heal itself. If you break your bone, whether you go for a doctor, orthopedic surgeon or not, it will join itself, rightly or wrongly. That's a different story, because that depends on the orientation and the alignment. But the bone will heal itself. So natural materials have the property of the self-healing. They have got the sensing property. Our skin, our tongue, they are the best example, even our nose. Then you will find that if you move across the microstructure, you will find the gradation of the properties. From center to the core, they have a systematic variation in the properties. And last, but the most important point, where I have written molecular tectonics. Molecular tectonics means in nature, synthesis of the particle to the fabrication of the component goes hand in hand. What we do in the materials industry, we collect the raw material, or we produce the raw material, then convert into a component. But in the nature, at the side where the component has to be made, or component has to be fabricated, the raw material will be synthesized then and there itself. So these are some beautiful property which can excite to any material scientist who has this sort of lookout. Even again, you look at the nature's kingdom, materials kingdom in the nature, you will find that there are very few raw material, very few salts like calcium-based salt or the barium-based salt or the silicon-based salt or the iron-based salt. There are only 6 or 7 type of salts which cover more than 70% of the biologically produced structure, and which are and these salts are being used, or this raw material have been used for the navigation, photonics, surface for surface engineering and for the mechanical application. So nature used only the 4 or 5 family of salt for from navigation, photonics, surface and mechanical performance. So these are all the few beauties. I will show another example here. If you can look at the curve, our bone, I talk about the bone. You can see bone, there is a hollow circle of the blue color. It's a composite. It's a nano composite of the protein called collagen and mineral hydroxyapatite. This is one of the calcium phosphate family member. The collagen is a matrix, and in that matrix is mineralized by hydroxyapatite nanoparticles. If you look at the fracture toughness of the collagen, which is just above the 0.1 MPa under root n, hydroxyapatite somewhere here around 1 MPa under root n. But if you put them together, then defying any law of mixture, the bone has got a strength at least more than an order of magnitude higher than of the hydroxyapatite. Right? Same thing, the nacre, the seashell. Seashell is a composite of a protein called nacre protein and aragonite. Aragonite is one of the phases of the calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate has got the 3 phases: calcite, vetrite, and aragonite. So if you look at the toughness, fracture toughness of nacre protein, it's very less. Aragonite is here, it is also very less. And you see for the nacre is somewhere here. Right. So all rule of mixture are defied in the naturally produced nanocomposite in terms of the strength. So these are the things which gives a inspiration to any material scientist who look the nanomaterial from the nature's perspective. Look in general. There are the many examples which are nowadays everybody talk about. It's a self-cleaning effect of the lotus leaf. We talk of the different paints and so on. You know, if you look at the leaf microstructure, there are the nano-size microstructure or the protrusion on the surfaces which create a overall hydrophobicity effect. And so this has got this self-cleaning ability. You know this spider web. The fiber of the spider web has got the specific strength higher than of the steel wire of the same diameter. I think few of may be knowing or may not be knowing about the structure colors. You know the colors in a peacock feather or the butterfly. Many of the families of the butterfly and the peacock feather who have got colorful wings and the feather, they have no pigment in it. Right? So from where such colors are produced? If you look at their macrostructure, we found that there is highly controlled optical grating that present in their wings or in the feather of the peacock. And because of that, the optical diffraction of the white light that takes place, that gives the impression of that particular color because of the controlled scattering. So that's the beauty of the nature. There is a magnetotactic bacteria. It is found in some of the sea beach. And the beauty of this bacteria is that it's a lipid layer which encapsulates 30 to 35 nanometer magnetite nanoparticles in it. An array of the magnetite nanoparticles is here. And with this array, this bacteria knows the depth and the direction of its swimming. They swim only in a particular direction which is aligned with the magnetic field. Right. Then I talk about the argon that Necker. If you look at the Necker microstructure or the snail microstructure, you will find that there are the layers of the calcium carbonate, which is a highly braided material. But this layer is separated by a very thin protein layer, right? So there are these weak interfaces between the two layers of the calcium carbonate. So if you put any stress vector on the top of that, because of the crystalline nature of the calcium carbonate, this stress vector will move in a particular crystallographic direction. It will cross that, it will break that layer, but next it will see a protein layer which has got an isotropic property, and this vector get isotropically distributed in the protein layer, so its component moving downwards will get reduced. So this is the mechanism, and it's move further and further down. This stress will, the stress vector moving down will be keep on decreasing and decreasing. So you will see an strength, that an increase in the toughness. So the calcium carbonate that you use in your classroom and the calcium carbonate that you find in the snail shell or the Necker, there is a 3000 times difference in the toughness. Same thing about the bone I told in the beginning. Bone is a nanocomposite of calcium phosphate, particular phase, calcium hydroxyphosphate. That nanocrystal of this calcium hydroxyphosphate nucleated and distributed in a collagen fibril, which is a protein. And the interfacing or the interaction is secondary, but our bone, which is synthesized in the mother's womb or even in our body, it has grown at room temperature and the pressure, no heat and beat, it has got the toughness of the order of the aluminum alloy. So yes, this gives you a wow feeling. So what can be learned from nature? We can learn two things from nature: how to design a material, and then how to synthesize a material. That I am talking molecular tectonics. Molecular tectonics is along with the synthesis of the material to convert into a component. These are the two very important lessons that a material scientist or a material engineer can learn from nature. So you can use nature as a model, measure and mentor. But nature has not developed this ability, this skill in a day. It's a result of almost 4 billion years of the evolution. Nature is constantly learning and changing itself. So that's the trick. That's the dynamism of the research and the creativity. Nature itself is not saturated with its art. So this is something, this slide says something about this process of biomineralization. As I said, that our body, our bone, they are all nanocomposites. So where the synthesis of the inorganic nanoparticle and the composite formation are taken together. And then in our body, we see the growth of bone. That's the inorganic material. And we also see that stone formation, kidney stone, gallbladder stone, and so on. So both are biomineralization. Mineralization under biological condition. But what is the difference? One mineralization is good, our bone growth is good, and stone formation is not good. So stone formation is biologically induced. It's not biologically controlled. Whereas our bone growth or whatever the inorganic structure that we produce in our body for the functionality, is a biologically controlled reaction. And nature is very important, and it happens in that way only. But it so depends on us. If our lifestyle, if our metabolism is not good, then everything leaks out from the cell. When it leaks out from the cell, then it finds cell surface as a heterogeneous nucleation site, and it starts growing, nucleating and growing over there. This happens with the biologically induced mineralization, like the kidney stone formation, because everything happens from cell, whether it's good or bad. So if due to our what you call physicochemical conditions, if we allow the things to leak in an uncontrolled way, they will grow here and there on the cells, and you will have a health issue. Otherwise, this is the intra or extracellular biologically controlled in, that bone mineralization, where the calcium phosphate get nucleated in a organic vesicles, which is comprising of the protein inside the cell, and then it pumps out and starts growing or start getting assembly. So, but this is not my objective, because I am not also a man of the biology. I cannot go much into the detail. But basic concept is, if you can use an organic matrix as a reactor, and knowing the structure of the organic matrix, you can, if you can nucleate nanoparticles there, you can create the process, or you can develop a process for the synthesis of nanomaterial with controlled structural morphology. That's the point is. So as I told you that in nature, inorganic materials are not synthesized in an aqueous environment as we do in the chemistry lab. In the chemistry lab, we do the precipitation mostly under aqueous environment in a test tube. There we also nucleate the nanomaterial, but that gets agglomerated and we lose all the benefits. But in biomineralization, I said the nucleation takes place in a supramolecular matrix, that's a protein matrix. Here I have shown one example of a globular protein. Globular protein has got a cavity in its quaternary structure. The cavity, the inside surface of the cavity is hydrophilic, the outer surface of the globule is hydrophobic. So if you can nucleate, or if you can exploit this cavity as a nanoreactor, you can synthesize the nanoparticle of the control dimension. So if you look at the feature of the biomineralizations, it occurs in specific subunits. It does not occur here and there. Nucleation is controlled at macromolecular level, and it does not need supersaturation. For any precipitation in chemistry lab, you need supersaturation. But because here we are doing it in the confined space of few nanometer in size, the precipitation occurs in undersaturation conditions. And here, the nucleation and the growth, they are temporarily separated. Whereas this is not possible in the general precipitation, where the nucleation and the growth are almost simultaneous. Once the nucleation takes place, that growth starts. And this, because of the surface chemistry, surface energy of the cavity, with the help of its energetics, it controls the polymorph to be synthesized. Means if we are talking about the iron oxide, so whether magnetite will form, or megamite will form, or hematite will form, that depends upon the surface energy available with those cavity, right? So it can control everything. So if you look overall, the process is very looks to be very simple, or you can see the entire process of this biomineralization is a 4-step process from material science point of view. We are not going into the biology. The first step is the pre-organization of a supramolecular matrix. You should have a supramolecular matrix. When we talk of the supramolecular matrix, it's a protein in the nature. In the lab, you can take a polymer. Then either it's a protein, biopolymer, or a synthetic polymer, they have got the functional group attached to it. And when we say the pre-organization of supramolecular matrix means you have to create a long-range order structure of your polymer and the protein. Once you do that, that means you are arranging their functional group in a well-defined manner. You can see here there is a something like hydroxyl ion-like situation. You can see minus, minus, minus. They are regularly spaced. Here also you can see the function. If those vertex of those hexagon are the functional groups, you can see that they are regularly placed like a lattice. Now, once you have got a supramolecular matrix in an organized manner, now if you expose it to the cations, so cations or anions, depending on the polarity, they will go and attach with the secondary bond to the functional group. Depending upon the ionic condition of the functional group of the ion, cation or the anions, they will go at the positive functional group or the negative functional group depending on the polarity. But they will reach the right side, they will not go randomly, right? And then under the optimum condition, you will have controlled nucleation, right? Suppose there was a negative functional group like hydroxyl functional group present in my polymer or protein. I have exposed it to the calcium ion. Calcium ions will go and sit with that negative group. Calcium being positively charged will go and sit with the negatively charged. Then if you give it, if you supply the carbonate ions, because of the molecular recognition, carbonate ions will attach to the calcium ion, forming the calcium carbonate. But those calcium carbonate will be formed at the well-defined places. So once the nucleation has taken place and some growth has started, the system will try to minimize its free energy. And to reduce the free energy, it is the nature's intelligence, the system will self-assemble itself in a particular shape and size depending upon the condition present over there. And in this way, our bone formation takes place. This is the entire process of biomineralization. Though it looks very simple, that you take any supramolecular matrix and put cation or anions into it, then expose to the subsequent ion, and you will get the controlled nucleation and growth. No, it does not happen so easily. But one thing is clear, there is a organic matrix, there is a and there is a inorganic phase which is growing in it. If it has grown on the organic matrix, that you have a organic inorganic interface. Now control on the inorganic interface or on the inorganic product is possible only there should be a matching in the lattice geometry of the inorganic phase that is nucleated and the spacing available with the supramolecular matrix. There should be a lattice geometry matching. There should be matching in the electrostatic potentials. There should be matching of the polarity. There should be a matching in the stereochemistry, space symmetry, and topography. Suppose if all these 6 parameters, if they match, you can create a nature-like control in your materials lab, but that is damn difficult. If you can have 2 or 3 control, or say 3 control, you can have a very much controlled process for the synthesis of nanomaterial. So biomimicry. Now, from this thing, when the scientists understood that this can be exploited for in the material science, this concept of nature or the biology can be exploited in the material science to develop new material or to develop the protocol for the synthesis of nanomaterial. This skill is known as biomimicry. So that is science and art of emulating nature's best biological idea to solve human problem. And biomimetics is a process. Biomimetics is a process that by which you can not replicate. Biomimetics is a process that you develop getting inspiration from the nature for your synthetic system, not for the natural system. So this was the introduction part about the biomimetics. Now I will show you some of the examples that we carried out in our lab. So when I joined this lab and we were having the problem in the neodymium iron boron and the concept, we thought we should start working with the biomimetics. So the only polymer that was available in NML was polyvinyl alcohol, because this is a very common polymer that is used for sintering aid and so on. So we started using polyvinyl alcohol. That was our exploratory work. And then I came in contact with one of the director of biological lab sciences, CSIR lab. And I showed my interest, and he supplied me some globular protein, egg oven serum albumin. So in NML, we have used, if I say the synthetic polymer as supramolecular matrix, that is polyvinyl alcohol and carboxymethyl cellulose. And if I say protein, we have used bovine serum albumin and the gelatin separately for the different nanomaterials. I will show you some of our experimental examples. So this is PVA structure. You know, PVA, it's a simple polymer, it's a water soluble, it's a biocompatible, it has got a hydroxyl functional group in which oxygen has a lone pair of electron. And this was the our mantra which we have clicked at that time, because this lone pair of electron can give us a proper binding site for the cations. And you can arrange this PVA, you can form a PVA gel from its water solution as a long range matrix. So we did all those things. I will show you. This was our first, one of the first experiment where we dissolved PVA of a known molecular weight, the known average molecular weight and the known concentration into water, and then allow it to form a gel at room temperature by physical cross-linking. Without we have not used any cross-linker. In none of our experiments have used any cross-linker. So we allowed it to form a gel. Once the gel is formed, we put it under vacuum to dehydrate it. Once it got dehydrated, we put it under electron microscope, and we found that there is a parallel arrangement of the PVA tubules. You can see here. Can you see my cursor moving? So you can see those PVA tubules of 5 to 10 nanometer in diameter and few micron in length. So we were excited. We thought we are getting something like supramolecular matrix. In the next experiment, we doped this PVA solution with the copper salt and allow that salt to precipitate along with the gelation. And then again, we put it under the microscope, and we found that calcium, that copper salt got precipitated identical in the manner we were seeing the PVA tubules. So this copper salt precipitation had just replicated the underlying conformation of the polymer matrix. And then we could in situ reduce this copper salt into copper metal. So in a single step process or in a single aqueous process, we developed aligned copper wires on a PVA substrate. So this was one of our very first experiment where we could mimic mimic the biomineralization process using a synthetic polymer for a engineering material. Second thing, we know that polymer solution is different from an inorganic solution and ionic solution. Polymer does not get disintegrated into its component like NaCl disintegrate into sodium and the chloride ions. But polymer does not. Polymer soils, and it soils to the extent that you will feel that it has gone. But it is basically soiled state. What we thought, what happens if in this soiled polymer we grow calcium carbonate and see the effect on the morphology and the crystallographic nature of this calcium carbonate if we use the different concentration of the PBA. So we took 2%, 4%, and 6% PBA solution, put in the calcium ion, give it around a week time for interactions at ambient temperature. We did not disturb it. Then pass on the carbon dioxide gas in those three reactors. Then we saw the white precipitation. We took the precipitate or those particles out, scoop it out, leave it to dry under ambient condition, and then we saw it under scanning microscope. The row on the top is showing the three morphology of calcium carbonate that we could develop in 2%, 4%, and 6% PBA. And when we carried out the X-ray diffraction, we found the under 2% we got calcite phase, in the 4% we got aragonite phase, and under 6% we got vaterite phase. So three phases. If you synthesize in a conventional way, the calcite is the room temperature phase, the aragonite is formed around 50 to 60 degrees centigrade, whereas the vaterite is around 80 to 90 degrees centigrade. They are a bit high temperature products. But here everything we got under ambient condition around 30 degrees centigrade just by changing the polymer concentration. But that's fine. But our surprise was when we looked into the literature of 1960 or so, we found that all these three phases of morphology of calcite, vaterite, and aragonite that exist in the three different organisms, and I forget the names, and I am not good in the biological names. So this is the second was from the literature. So this is the calcite which is found in the nature. This is the aragonite which is found in the nature, and this is the vaterite that is found in the nature. And you can see these are the things that we develop in the lab. Morphology is very, very similar. Calcium carbonate has got another phase, which is monoclinic phase. But that is reported in that again in the literature that is synthesized. It's a high pressure phase and synthesized at 60 gigapascal. It's a too high pressure. But accidentally, I do not know why, we took 20% PBA solution and synthesized calcium carbonate in that. And there we got at room temperature the monoclinic phase, and this came out as a cover page of the journal. So now I will once again request the audience to please mute their mic. Thank you. The second experiment we took with a protein, that is bovine serum albumin. It's a globular protein. There is a model. If you see, look at this model, you will find that there is a square of the cuboid cavity in its quaternary structure. Here, this is 4-fold symmetry. It's a 3-fold symmetry. Here, you can see something like 2-fold symmetry. So something like very cubic structure, if you see it on the microscope in the different orientation, the point group symmetry. So we took bovine serum albumin. It's again a water soluble, and we start playing with this. I will show you. It's interesting. We took bovine serum albumin, dissolve it in the water, and allow it to form a gel under clean condition at ambient conditions, at room temperature. Once the gel is formed, we dehydrated that and put under transmission electron microscope. If you look at this slide, where I am roaming my India cursor, you will see there are the elliptical cases. So we thought that yes, we have arrested those cages present in the protein quaternary structure. But how to ensure and utilize it? In the next experiment, while making this protein solution, we dissolved ferrous and ferric ion into it and then raise the pH little bit and allow it to be there for a week. After a week, once we saw in the electron microscope, we noticed that there is a nucleation of a black particle. You can see it's in the black color, that's what I'm saying, black. A black particle inside the cavity of this gel. And we were lucky that we got the next location. There was this cavity was fully occupied by a similar crystal. And the shape and size, you can see it's very similar to the cavity that we have seen in our first, in this picture. And we have seen even on the same sample at other places, we have got number of such crystallization in those cavity. There was no crystallization in the bulk. So this was very exciting that here in the protein, we could exploit this nano cavity present in the protein structure and could nucleate the nanoparticles of magnetite Fe3O4, and which is very similar to what happened in the magnetotactic bacteria. This is a picture from literature where they are showing that the nucleation of the magnetite nanoparticle in the bacteria, it takes place in the same way as we are seeing in our sample. So this was our second success in mimicking the biomineralization. And again, we know that protein is a very sensitive structure. If we little bit heat it or little bit stir it during the solution formation, it will denature. So intentionally, we denatured the protein and then again carry out the in situ nucleation and the growth of magnetite particle. We found that the protein has lost its control over shape, size, and the agglomeration of the magnetic nanoparticle. You can see in the bottom microstructure here. So it's very important to control or not to allow the protein to denature when you are carrying out your material synthesis. Then we confirmed, we did some physics out of it. We found that our magnetic nanoparticle that we synthesized in the native protein structure, they were super paramagnetic in nature and they can be used for different biomedical application. Then my colleague, Dr. Suprabha Nair, she took this process ahead because I don't have that much patience to carry on it further. So, and she developed a water-based process, a process of biomimetic ferrofluid, which is, this ferrofluid is very stable. The challenge is to keep it stable. So this was stable under aqueous environment for more than 1.5 years. And with the help of our sister laboratory, CCMB, the one again indication or the one again sutra that you can take from my talk is the importance of collaboration and the role of collaboration in the research. Because we are material scientists, we are not good in the biology or the lab sciences, and if we try to do that, many of the labs now or many of the academic institutes, they are trying to have biological lab, cell lab in the materials department, metallurgy department, chemical department. But we found to give a good speed, it's better to use the existing expertise in the country. So we collaborated with the Center of Cellular and Molecular Biology, Hyderabad, and they confirm that in the MRI, if we use our ferrofluid in the MRI of the soft organs of tissues, the injection of this ferrofluid can help in increasing the image contrast from the soft organs or from the soft tissue, which generally create a problem. So this has been potentially used for that. Nowadays, people talk about the nano silver for antimicrobial properties, but Suprabha's work has shown that in the same biomimetic iron oxide nanoparticle, they have got the good antimicrobial property, which is much cheaper, and also the anti-cancer property. So it's a more economical way of dealing the day-to-day problem. Now coming to the next part of my talk, and where again we used PVA, and this became a business. Not a business, I should not say it's a business, it's became the technology transfer case. As you know that calcium hydroxyphosphate is our bone mineral part. So this can be used as synthetic bone graft. I'm not going detail in the biomaterial. Professor Raichur must have talked about the biomaterial science and so on. I will just showcase here this the case study. So as you say, the PBA, as I showed earlier, have got the tubular structure. So if on that we nucleate hydroxyapatite, we can get the fibrous form of the hydroxyapatite. And if we change the concentration of our PBA solution, we can change the aspect ratio, which in turn change the cell material interaction. So we in situ synthesized hydroxyapatite in PBA. We did not mix hydroxyapatite with PBA. Again, we in situ synthesized hydroxyapatite into PBA, and the bottom row shows as we change the polymer concentration from 1 to 10%, the aspect ratio of synthesized nanoparticle change from 2.8 to 11.45. When once we give this sample to CCMB, Hyderabad, they have shown with the help of the stem cell that an increase in the aspect ratio of the hydroxyapatite nanoparticles have a order of the magnitude higher, good addition of the stem cell on the inorganic nanoparticles, so they can help in the bone healing process. And this process, though I am showing here that the microstructure we develop on the semi-industrial or on the industrial scale. But hydroxyapatite is a biocompatible material. It does not instruct body to heal. Once the body starts healing itself, it supports that healing process. In the next experiment, we change the chemistry. We change the chemistry of hydroxyapatite. We produce a calcium deficient hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite formula is Ca10PO4 whole 6OH whole twice. We produce Ca10 minus X in PVA matrix. And we decompose. Once it's precipitated, we decompose it into two-phase material. One is hydroxyapatite, second is the beta calcium phosphate. Because many nanotechnologists or nanomaterial scientists have come out with the concept that if you use hydroxyapatite, that is the biocompatible material, along with some biological growth markers, they are the biomolecules, then your material can become osteoinstructive. That means it can instruct the body to heal. But the problem with the biological marker is, as their origin is biological, their shelf life is very small, their cost is very high, cannot be afforded by a common man, and there is a doubt of the infection. So what we thought, we know that calcium phosphate, beta calcium phosphate has the similar property. So if in material we can produce this sort of nanocomposite of the two phases, we will get the strength as well as the bioactivity. So we could produce it biomimetically in the nano size on the large scale. And then we again gave it to CCMB. CCMB carried out in vitro and in vivo experiment, means the experiment with the cells in the petri dish as well as experiment in using the animal, and they found that this two-phase material developed by us in a biomimetic way, when it is exposed to stem cells within a short time start converting to the bone-forming cell. And this paper has been published. There are 2 or 3 papers on this line where we show that using simply the material chemistry and the surface energy, you can induce the bioactivity in a synthetic material without using a biological growth markers or biological growth factors. And this process, these two processes, that is the hydroxyapatite and this two-phase material, was immediately taken by Chennai-based industry I think in the 2004 or 5 at that time, and it was, but we did only the materials characterization in between vivo test. We say the clinical trial is not our forte because it's a very long time and we are not the expert. So company took the know-how from us, and then they got the license, then they carry out the conventional test, and then they commercialize the products known as Savograph and Savograph Plus, and it's a very good product. Even for last 15 years, we are getting royalty of this material. Again, this material was taken by, this technology was taken by another industry in Shahjahanpur, UP. Surgiwear happens to be the one of the biggest biomaterial industry, the indigenous industry of India, and they are well known internationally for their bioceramics, the hydroxyapatite and the calcium phosphate and so on. So they took this know-how from us and commercialized. So we have produced the nano powder in a controlled way, controlled morphology, controlled shape, things like that, and it has been translated to the industry. Now, where we go from powder? In bone, now we go, once we have the support from the industry and good collaboration from the industry, I'm being a physicist, start enjoying the biomaterial research. We were not doing that great biological science. We were limited to our material science, but we were thinking of some innovations. Now there are few bone defects which are very fine in size. Generally, most of the time it comes because of the osteoporosis in the age-related problem in the ladies, where the defect is very fine. You cannot operate it. You cannot put a plaster on it. It's difficult to heal. So there is a concept of the bone cement. Bone cement is internationally available in the market. And that is injected, that is injectable bone cement. So once you inject it at that particular site of the defect, it undergoes cementation. And cementation is an exothermic process. So once it goes under cementation, to heal the or to fill the gap, it increases the nearby temperature, and that creates problem to the cell in the viscosity of the defects. So it creates some irritation, some of the other health issues. So people thought of to develop another product which is free from cementing action. There were some company in India, they produced, but the problem was that as they injected into the body or under any physiological condition where water was present or body fluid was present, the structure was not stable. It was getting washed away. What we thought, our hydroxyapatite, which is biomimetically synthesized, you can think of those red particles as hydroxyapatite. It is synthesized under the polymer matrix, which has got a functional group on the surface. So they are functionalized on the surface. So I thought if we convert it into a paste and if you put them together due to the pressure, they can come along, they can please mute. I will request the audience one again. Thank you. So what I noticed, what we thought, if you can bring those biomimetic hydroxyapatite particle together in a paste form, the polymers coated on the surface of the particle will cross-link themselves physically and form a continuous network, and without any cementing action, they will form a three-dimensional network. This was with the help of the mechanical interlocking, capillary forces, van der Waals interactions, and so on. This was the concept, and we could do that. We have our hydroxyapatite, simply make it a paste with the help of a buffer and put in a normal syringe, the 24 gauge, and we directly injected this paste into water. You look here, we are injecting into the water. I have the video, but I am not running it here. And there was some bubble formation because the air was entrapped into those extruded structure of calcium hydroxyapatite. And after that, they were stable. There were no degradation, there were no anti-washing effect. And we looked at the microstructure that was highly porous, which is a requirement for the bone graft for the cell interaction. We again, with the help of CCMB, we did the animal test, published paper on the bioactivity of our paste, and we determined its mechanical properties. Its mechanical property was quite good, even better than the internationally available product. And this know-how was taken by another industry, IFGL. It's a well-known ceramic and refractory industry in the Eastern India. Now coming to the one of the last part, not the last part, I have two more parts. I will firstly cover to that. We have produced nano powder in a biomimetic way. We have produced the injectable. Now, can we replace this bone plate? Once somebody undergoes a major fracture where the large portion of the bone is lost, doctor put up a plate. For an old guy, it's okay. But for a young guy, he has to go under that revision surgery after the bone is healed to get the plate out, because having the different young modulus, there is the effect of stress shielding, and if the plate is on in the bone, it will weaken the bone where it is fitted, because the stress distribution is not common, and it will eat away the bone, nearby bone. So it's a painful process, it's a money involving process, and it's not comfortable. So can we develop a bone-like structure with the same strength as of the bone, so that we can fit it into the broken part, and the natural bone will form due to the bioactivity of this 3D scaffold that we have, that is the biomimetic 3D scaffold that we have put into the bone in place of the bone. So for such a 3D bone implant or the bone graft, which is biomimetic and has got bone-like chemistry and the property, it should have high porosity, proper size distribution, high surface area, controlled biodegradability, mechanical stability. This is a contradiction in the requirements. See, you need mechanical stability as well as the high porosity. So how to balance that? Then non-toxicity and bioactivity. So I will directly come here. So because we were doing this thing in a polymer matrix, we thought that why should not we allow our mineralized gel to stand for a longer time? Then let polymer, the mineralized polymer get further that cross-linked itself without any physical external cross-linker and form a 3D structure. But here we changed the polymer. Instead of PVA, we took the gelatin. Gelatin is a denatured form of the collagen, which is the bone protein. So and the gelatin is water soluble. So we took the gelatin, doped it with the calcium ion, then after a few days, subject it to the phosphate bath. So calcium calcium phosphate salts got precipitated. You can see here at the well-defined size. With time, when we carried out the macroscopy, we saw that the clusters of the hydroxyapatite that start growing and forming a 3D network, which is porous. Something like this. This is our product. After 10 days or 15 days, we got such a 3D product, which is polymer hydroxyapatite, nanocomposite. We produced with a different polymer concentration, carried out the scanning electron microscopy, and noticed that pore size distribution in the pore size changes with polymer concentration. When increased the magnification, we found that these polymer walls, they are highly mineralized with hydroxyapatite nanoparticle. You can look at here, and they are around 80 to 100 nanometer in size. The problem was that the mechanical strength was not good, so we cannot use it for a load-bearing implant application. For non-load bearing, it's fine. Then my colleague, Dr. Subhadra Garai, she took the process. She changed the polymer from gelatin or PVA to CMC, cellular methyl cellulose. And the process was same. Then she showed that such a nanocomposite, it has got the better mechanical property, something like 20 MPa, and some superplasticity, that is very much likely because of the polymer, and this has got the bioactivity. This know-how was so liked by the industry that they immediately took it over. So Surgiware has taken this know-how from us and they started developing into a commercially product. Then further, to increase further the mechanical strength, one of our PhD student, she make a composite of the polymer before nucleating the hydroxyapatite. She took CMC gelatin the two polymer together, and then in situ synthesize the hydroxyapatite into the 3D structure. She dried it at 50 degrees centigrade for a rapid drying, and here we got the strength of the order of 85 MPa, compressive strength, and modulus was 1.2 GPa. So we were increasing the modulus. Then she carried out the cytocompatibility test and so on, and confirmed that they are bioactive osteoinductive material which can instruct the body to start healing itself. This I will not go into the detail. These are the typical bioactivity result: cell adhesion, cell interactions. And then that was the hydroxyapatite. Similar thing we did with the biphasic material and developed a load-bearing biphasic nanocomposite in a biomimetic way. And this process was also taken by the Surgiware for the commercial exploitation. We confirm again the bioactivity through interaction with the Shri Chitra, through collaboration with Shri Chitra Trinal Trivandrum. Then whatever we were doing, we were getting the bone graft with the higher mechanical strength as well as good bioactivity, but we were not touching close to the bone modulus, that is the cortical bone, the hard part of the bone. Then what we did, we used orthopedic grade carbon fiber and reinforce our polymer matrix with it before going for the hydroxyapatite precipitation in it. So we could do that and develop a product which have got the mechanical strength, especially the modulus of the order of the bone. And this process was also immediately taken by the Surgiware. So I will not go into the detail. You see the process is very similar what I am talking of. This is the macrostructure. You can see highly aligned copper wires. On that, carbon fiber. On that, the precipitation of the hydroxyapatite has taken place. We confirm with the different characterization tool and the elemental analysis, things like that. And we got the mechanical property, and I am happy that we have reached the flexure modulus of the order with the different carbon fiber. We have got up to the 22.34 gigapascal from 7.34 where there was no carbon fiber, 9.19, 12.28. When in this sample where the carbon fiber was high, 0.75 fiber weight percent contained, we got 22.34, and you see the human bone flexure modulus vary from 7 to 25 gigapascal. So we are very close, and this has been translated. We confirmed the bioactivity because we were worried about the carbon fiber and the toxicity related with it. What Shri Chitra Trinal and the other lab confirmed that there is no toxicity involved here. There is no toxicity. It's again biocompatible and bioactive material. Anyway, this I will not go into the detail. This is another part which is very active, and here we have a major contribution. In 2007, India launched first recoverable space capsule. Till date, ISRO is launching the space vehicle, and the space vehicle, after completing its life, it remains in the space as a debris. And so we could not carry out any manned mission. Now India is thinking of the manned mission, and this was the first attempt in 2007 towards the manned mission, where ISRO wanted to develop a technology to bring back the space vehicle on Earth. So they launched an unmanned space vehicle in 2007, and there I got the opportunity to develop a payload to carry out the biomimetic synthesis under microgravity and see the effect, what happens, what difference we notice in the hydroxyapatite grown in lab and in the microgravity. There were the two regions. Whatever we were doing, we were not able to reduce the size of hydroxyapatite or calcium phosphate crystal less than 80 nanometer on the ground in our lab. Whereas if you see human bone, it's around 3 to 5 nanometer, right? That is means that in human bone, in biology, the supramolecular matrix has a much better control. So the concept came to us, if we can carry out an experiment where gravitational force is not there, then supramolecular matrix will have a better scope to exert its control. With that philosophy, we did it. You can ask a question, we are born under 1G condition, but we have got a good control. Yes, our body or every part of our body is formed or is synthesized under genetic control, right? And genetic control is a very strong force, but a very short range. So it is such a strong force and short range which cannot be disturbed by a long range and weak gravitational force. Gravitational force is a weak and long range force. So in the lab, whatever you do, you are not doing anything genetically. So your stresses, your vectors will definitely be interfered by the gravitational vectors. So my thesis was we are not having that control. For an unmanned vehicle, we have to devise a payload. That's a different story. I'm not going to talk about this, but carrying out the synthesis of hydroxyapatite was not a challenge. Challenge was to develop a payload, to develop a machine for an unmanned vehicle which can be operated from the ground. Anyway, with the help of the ISRO, we could develop it. Here you see the satellite capsule after the recovery. There is a ISRO team, and this is me and my student, and this is at the ISEC Center, Bangalore, after recovery. And for our experiment, the satellite was in the orbit for 7 days. When this we developed the payload, gave it to ISRO for flight worthiness, they tested it, and we carried out the experiment in space. At the same time, we were carrying out an experiment in the lab with the same experimental parameter in the same time window as we have given to ISRO. Once this space capsule came back, we collected our sample, we carried out the comparison in our sample that we got in the microgravity, and once we synthesized in the lab, we have to change the composition, polymer, etc., because of looking at the carrying out the confirming the possibility that experiment should be doable in absence of any human being. So here this first photograph shows the hydroxyapatite rods synthesized in our lab under same condition as under 1G condition for the same chemical concentration and so on as for the space. And this is one we developed into the space. You can see highly oriented, long range, parallel ERA and PV hydroxyapatite rods. Here it's a random bundle. And when we looked at the microstructure, the tooth enamel, it is very similar to what we have got under microgravity. And from the X-ray diffraction, we confirm that we are dealing with the hydroxyapatite and nothing else. When we carried out the electron microscopy of the two samples, that is carried out under microgravity in the space, and once carried out in our lab, we found that in our lab we synthesized the rods of say 100 nanometer in size. But in microgravity, the TM study showed hydroxyapatite was 3 to 5 nanometer. Right? Order of magnitude reduction in size. There is a lot of microgravity work on crystallization, which confirms that under microgravity, you will have homogeneous nucleation of the large size crystals where we have got the otherwise result. We have got order of magnitude reduction, and this indicates the problem that most of the astronauts faced after they come back on the Earth. of the osteoporosis, because it simply seems under macrogravity, because bone is continuously in the process of molding and the remodeling. So under macrogravity, the bone crystals which is formed in the body are of the different size or maybe much smaller than they fit into the protein cavity, and that's why their bone gets weakened. So, but that was an interesting result, very exciting experiment that we carried out with the help of ISRO at NML. This is a very recent work that we have carried on with the industrial intervention. You know the metal rods and so on that we are going, but now there is a concept, can we develop a biodegradable alloys? Because whatever biomimetic material you develop, it is very difficult to beat the metals. But metal have got the problem of the density, weight, and then the Young modulus. So can we develop some biodegradable, the metallic implant that biodegrade itself in the body after completing the healing? And most of you are from metallurgy, you know that magnesium is one of such is one of the candidates for such implants. But you know, magnesium is highly reactive, very difficult. It gets away within no time under aqueous environment or biological environment. So we start dealing with this problem with the help of the Sir-G-Wear again. I am not going into the properties or the corrosion rate of the different implant, but we have developed different magnesium alloys at a subsequent large scale casting of 10 kg. And this magnesium also produced at by NML technology. NML developed a technology of magnesium production in 1960s and transferred it to Andhra-based industry. There they produce magnesium. Now the industry shut down, and the magnesium is lying with NML. So we use that magnesium and develop magnesium rare earth alloy, magnesium zinc manganese alloy, and so on. And we carried out the mechanical characterization. We have got some very high strength alloy, developed some very high strength alloys, right? And but now presently we are working with the magnesium zinc manganese alloy, which shows the UTS of 276 MPa with 26% elongation. The problem was that again it's corrosion and it's very fast degradation rate. The industrial challenge is after 19-day exposure in the biological environment, your alloy or your implant should have 90% of strength. After 90 days, it can degrade at any rate it wants. So we have to make it stable and strong for 90 days. So there are reports, now people have the number of coatings reported. They are good for papers, but they are not working on the industrial scale. So we try to develop a multi-layer zinc coating through a novel route. It's an electroplating process, which was itself a challenge. We got coating zinc on the magnesium, a lot of electrochemical issues. What we could do that. And again, this process we are giving to Sir-G-Wear, it's a collaborative process. Then we also, along with the magnesium, we are also playing with the zinc, because zinc does not have the issue of the uncontrolled degradation. We have to increase its degradation rate. So we are working on the magnesium, zinc magnesium alloy with the low percentage of magnesium in it. And we have got some zinc 1% magnesium 0.1 yttrium with a optimum property which can be used for implant application. So I hope within and after doing all those characterization, we are looking at the machinability and the fabrication. So we are collaborating with one of the young engineer who has recently joined our workshop. So he has fabricated some zinc plate, zinc screw. Now we are working with the magnesium wires, magnesium plate, magnesium screw. So with this, as I say that, but I am unfortunate that my both co-workers, Dr. Suprabha Nair, who took this ferrofluid work, and Dr. Subhadra Garai, she took the bioceramic work. They are unfortunately no more in the past 2 years. They both have passed away. So what can I say? It's our so our work on the hydroxyapatite is now a bit slow. We are working with the magnesium and the zinc alloy, but I thank all my students, all my collaborators, and we have international collaboration. Professor Serena Best at Cambridge, Professor Tom Webster, he was at Brown University, now I think he's in Southwestern Boston. Professor Bikramjit Basu, IISc Bangalore, Dr. Shashi Singh at CCMB. So learning is on. This is our picture with our industrial partner, Surgiwear. Surgiwear owner is a surgeon by training, by practice, but he is a better metallurgical engineer than many of the graduate metallurgical engineers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It's very nice talk and very informative, and a lot of things we have learned through this talk. Any query from participant side?
I had to be a bit fast. I do not know how much is.
आपने सर डेढ़ घंटा
Anyway,
दिया सर, पूरा टाइम दिया सर आपने.
yeah. So I also calibrated myself.
Yes, sir. Sir,
So-
मेरा query था. Suppose you want to add Ti2 particles in the PVA. Then is it possible to achieve this strength as you did?
See, I think there are a few people are trying on this to develop with this photocatalyst and so on. Only thing, see, first of all, we are not dispersing, we are in situ synthesizing in the polymer, right? But if you want to disperse, you have to functionalize those particles, so they should not agglomerate. I think Nagpur or somewhere, because when we were doing atomic force microscopy, I got few samples on the polymer dispersion of TiO2 in polymer. Yeah, it is possible, but strength, you have to optimize.
Yes, sir.
How much, what is the strength you want to achieve? Then how much TiO2 you have to disperse, and you have to ensure that there should be uniform dispersion. So this is all a recipe basically.
Yes, sir.
So
one of my PhD students, she did work on this Ti2 particles dispersed in the PVA. But we did not achieve so much strength on that.
Which PVA you have used? See, what was the strength of the PVA? What was the average molecular weight of the PVA? What is the degree of crystallinity of that? Because everything matters. Once you have
how much the degree of polymerization of that?
Average molecular weight. And then dispersion uniform हुआ कि नहीं, sedimentation हुआ क्या? All those things.
Sir, very thankful to you, sir.
It's my pleasure. If anybody wants to see, I think you can. They can talk to me. They can get my email if there is any question or any interest.
Okay, sure, sir.
Okay, thank you.
आपको सर डिपार्टमेंट में बुलाएंगे सर, थोड़ा ही कोविड का कम होगा, उसके बाद डिपार्टमेंट में बुलाएंगे आपको.
Sure.
राजेश साहब के बारे में बहुत अच्छी बातें करता है सर.
It's my pleasure. अभी तो राजेश है ना उधर.
हाँ, यही है सर राजेश. राजेश यार ऑनलाइन. राजेश कुमार राय.
ठीक है.
हाँ, उन्हें सर ज्वाइन किया सर. है ज्वाइन.
Yeah. He's a good student.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I am leaving. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Participants, I will send you next link for your email as well WhatsApp. So join for at 2:30 p.m. Thank you.